The Philadelphia Church of God presents the Trumpet Daily.
Over this past year, we've written quite a lot on what's been transpiring in the Middle East, in particular Egypt, just because it's been so significant prophetically. And just in the last 12 months, since Hosni Mubarak was pretty much high-pressured out of office by the United States of America, we've seen Islamic extremism on the rise, on the march, as they've gone around the country, persecuting Christians in the nation, burning down churches, persecuting believers in the Christian religion, spreading, of course, the Sharia law as far as it will go. We've seen them reaffirm the fact that they're not going to recognize Israel. You may remember, too, back in, I think it was September of last year, where they stormed the embassy of Israel and had them hold up, the Jews hold up inside of that embassy, and they had to send over some jets from Israel just to rescue the Israeli representatives in the middle of the night. So that's gone on in recent months. Just last month in January, we saw the Islamist hardliners, led by the Muslim Brotherhood, win in a landslide, really. 72% of the parliament was voted in from the hardline Islamist parties, the Muslim Brotherhood, and then, of course, the even more extreme wing, the Salafist party, I think it's called. But 72%, and this comes after we were assured last year, of course not by the Trumpet.com, but by the liberal media like the New York Times, which said that the Brotherhood, it actually called the Brotherhood the bumbling Brotherhood, because they were no threat, don't worry about it, nothing to worry about here, everything's going to be good. And now we see them basically in charge of Egypt. Just recently, the Egyptian government decided to press ahead on prosecuting 19 Americans that they claim have fomented unrest in the nation of Egypt. And they're over there working for these nonprofit organizations, trying to spread democracy, and the Egyptian government doesn't like it. And so they're moving forward to persecute even Americans. And yet, despite all of this, despite the fact that clearly it's another Islamic revolution, patterned after what's happened in Iran previously, decades earlier, despite all of this, you still have liberal elites today who are out there in darkness, total darkness and ignorance, ever hopeful that the new Egyptian constitution, whenever it's drawn up, will provide all of these rights for the Egyptian people, for women, for homosexuals. It's going to be another Western-style democracy, they think. Still. Even as the Islamists are gaining power by the week, by the day, blind guides, acting as if a piece of paper will somehow prevent the extremists from implementing their tyranny, from enforcing Sharia law. You might have heard recently where one of our Supreme Court justices, Ruth Ginsburg, was over in Egypt and was very complimentary of what's happened in Egypt in this past year. She said it's a very inspiring time that you've overthrown a dictator and that you are striving to achieve a genuine democracy. This is great. She's one of the leading women in America, one of only 9 Supreme Court justices. Everything's going great. A genuine democracy, she said. She lavished praise, all kinds of praise, on the recent elections in January, saying that they were free, they were fair, and not commenting on the fact that 72% of those seats were filled by those who are really proponents of Sharia law, Islamic law. But even more shocking than her endorsement of what's happening in Egypt is the fact that in the very same interview, she went on to trash the United States Constitution, of all things, our supreme law, our founding document. She said, "I wouldn't look to the U.S. Constitution if I were drafting a constitution in the year 2012. Egypt is now busy trying to produce a founding document, and she suggested that they don't look to the United States, don't look to America as a model, look to something more recent, look to something newer, look to something more progressive." She made a few recommendations. The South African Constitution, for example, which has a lot of the liberal babies in it, health care and housing, education for everyone, more restrictions on free speech. Liberal elites, of course, want this because they want to get rid of anything deemed to be controversial. She plugged Canada, she plugged the European Union, but not the United States. In her mind, the United States document, the document that the framers drew up, is too old. It's too old. I mean, we're going on 2 centuries here. And those men from another age, they were writing for that age. It doesn't so much apply to today. I mean, she's not even trying to conceal her contempt for the law on which this land was established. She wants a constitution like so many other progressive thinkers that's more malleable, that's more flexible, that can adapt to the times, that can conform to liberal ideas and the liberal agenda. She wants something that can be manipulated. Now, she's hardly the first in a long line of progressives, really, to come along calling for this, for something more flexible. But still, even still, it's quite shocking to see this sort of thing go on. As much as we know these kinds of things are prophesied, it still is shocking to witness, to see a Supreme Court justice, of all people, insulting the supreme law of our land while speaking in front of an audience from another land. I guess if you look at it another way, maybe it makes sense in this upside-down world, because if she's trying to find some place on earth where she can get a warm reception for bashing the U.S. Constitution, Egypt's probably a pretty good place to go. That's probably a good place to start, because they're not interested in modeling anything that they have after the United States Constitution, or any Western-style democracy for that matter. We know where that's headed. In 1987, this was just 25 years ago, this was at the 200-year anniversary of the United States Constitution, Time magazine estimated that out of 170 countries, more than 160 of those countries had written charters modeled directly or indirectly on the U.S. version. This was 25 years ago. That's not very long. That was a time when most of the nations of this world were looking to the United States and its founding documents. And how times have changed. 25 years on, we see a very different picture beginning to emerge. The supreme law of the United States is losing its appeal around the world, and, even more shocking, right here in the United States of America. As in the case of that Supreme Court justice, even our own president has talked about how he's restricted by the Constitution. He can't make the kinds of aggressive changes he wants to make because the founders prevent him from doing that because of how they drew up the Constitution. The New York Times, as you would expect, rushed to the defense of Justice Ginsburg in a piece they wrote on February the 6th. It talks about the number of reasons that the U.S. document is losing its appeal. It says there's lots of possible reasons. The United States Constitution is terse and old, and it guarantees relatively few rights. The commitment of some members of the Supreme Court to interpreting the Constitution according to its original meaning in the 18th century may send the signal that it is of little current use to say a new African nation. And then it concludes here saying, and the Constitution's waning influence may be part of a general decline in American power and prestige. Well, I mean, they're right about that for sure. It really is fulfilling Bible prophecy. A number of prophecies, in fact. Let's look at one of them, Isaiah chapter 3. These prophecies in the book of Isaiah, of course, were written, most of them, mainly for this end time, mainly for our time today. But look at what's happened just in the space of 25 years. Look at America's power and how rapidly it's in decline. And look at the ones that are targeting the law of the land, the Constitution, that are trying to tear it down. We don't have to go outside of our borders to find those people. They're right here. They're right here in our midst. And God has prophesied that it would be this way. Isaiah 3, verse 1, it says, for behold, the Lord of hosts, does take away from Jerusalem and from Judah the stay and the staff, the whole stay of bread and the whole stay of water, the mighty man and the man of war, the judge, it says, and the prophet, all the leaders, you see. God will take them away. All the leaders in the people of Israel, the descendants, the latter-day descendants of ancient Israel, which we know are in the United States. They're in Britain. They're in the Commonwealth nations that used to be a part of that British Empire. All of those people, we see the leadership. You see, it's gone. The captain of 50, the honorable man, the counselor, the cunning artificer, the eloquent orator. It says, and I will give children to be their princes, and babes shall rule over them, and shall be oppressed, every one by another, and every one by his neighbor. The child shall behave himself proudly against the ancient, and the base against the honorable. That's what we're descending to. No matter how many progressive thinkers like to think that we're making progress, progressive means moving forward. In fact, we're going backward. We're going backward. We're certainly evolving, but it's not in the right direction. God says He's taken away the judge. He's taken away the wise prophet, the counselor, the teacher, the educators, even the mighty men of war. And our leadership, in too many cases, is childish. That's what he's bringing out there in verses 4 and 5. Childish leadership. Look at Isaiah chapter 5 and verse 11. These progressive thinkers are going to get what they want. They're going to get a more malleable document. They're going to impose their ideas, their ways on the United States. They've already had some pretty great success in doing so. It's coming. It's going to worsen. Isaiah 5 and verse 11, it says, woe unto them that rise up early in the morning, that they may follow strong drink, that continue until night, till wine inflame them. All kinds of addictions in this world. America must surely lead in so many of those sins, those weaknesses. Weaknesses that we like to think are freedom, the freedom to be drunk on any occasion, the freedom to go after pornography, the freedom to do these sorts of things. And in fact, it's the worst kind of slavery and captivity there is. It's an addiction to sin. And people die, and families break down because of it, and society unravels. The founding blocks of our society crumble. Verse 12 says, and the harp and the viol, the tabret, the pipe, and wine are in their feast, but they regard not the work of God, neither consider the operation of His hands. Therefore my people are gone into captivity, because they have no knowledge, and their honorable men are famished, and their multitude dried up with thirst. See, God's people, we'll look at Hosea 4 here in just a second, but God's people are headed for destruction. The people of Israel, both spiritual and physical, are headed for destruction because of this lack of knowledge, because of this rejection of what's true and right, in favor of something that's more malleable, that can be easily adjusted, that can be lowered with the standards of society, of political correctness, of the liberal agenda, whatever it is. It's a decline. And even in the article that the New York Times puts forward to try to defend people like Bader Ginsburg, even those articles acknowledge that America is in rapid decline. They can't seem to see the irony there. They can't seem to make the connection between the two. The fact that we want to get away from the original intent, the fact that we want to get away from what's true, the knowledge that doesn't change over time. Verse 15, and the mean man shall be brought down, and the mighty man shall be humbled, and the eyes of the lofty shall be humbled, but the Lord of hosts shall be exalted in judgment, it says, and God that is holy shall be sanctified in righteousness. It continues the thought then in verse 20, woe unto them that call evil good, and good evil, and put darkness for light, and light for darkness, and put bitter for sweet, and sweet for bitter. You would think that someone traveling to a foreign land, someone going into Egypt, someone who's sworn to uphold the U.S. Constitution would have a few good things to say about it. That's just common sense. To fulfill her oath of office, you would think she'd be out there promoting the United States document, endorsing the United States document. As it is, she says it's too old. It goes too far back. We need something newer. We need something more modern. Well, they're going to get it. They're going to get what they want. We are evolving into anarchy. That's where it's headed. And there's other prophecies that I could put forward to make that point. Ezekiel 5 comes to mind. We are headed for anarchy, because the judges that used to uphold the rule of law are gone. Or if they do uphold it, they're put down. They're shoved aside. And look at the ones that are rising to the top. Woe unto them that are wise in their own eyes and prudent in their own sight. See our leaders today, they think they know more than James Madison. They think they know more than George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, John Adams. They think they know more than God, in fact. Hosea 4, as I mentioned, let's look at that. Hosea chapter 4. Woe unto them that are wise in their own eyes. Woe unto them that call evil good, and that call good evil. Look at where it's headed, as is brought out here in Hosea, verse 1 of chapter 4. Hear the word of the Lord, you children of Israel, for the Lord has a controversy with the inhabitants of the land, because there's no truth, nor mercy, nor knowledge of God in the land. Read Romans 1 sometime and see what happens to a society when it rejects God's truth, when it rejects God's knowledge. See what we're then left with. It says reprobate minds, minds that are void of judgment. Judgment. That's what that means in Romans 1. The judge is taken away. Just judgment is removed. And it gets back to sin, It always does. Verse 2, by swearing and lying and killing and stealing and committing adultery, they break out, and blood touches blood. See, sin everywhere. Our cities are falling apart. They've already descended into anarchy in many cases. And it's going to get a whole lot more violent in the months and years ahead. And here is the cause. This is why. The lying, the killing, the stealing, the adultery, all those sins. It's destroying us. Verse 6 says, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Because you have rejected knowledge, I will also reject you, that you shall be no priest to me. Seeing you have forgotten the law of your God, I will also forget your children. Well, forget about God's law. I mean, in today's society, that's long since been forgotten. Now we're moving towards forgetting about the law of the United States. Forget about that. Let's get something where we're updating our constitutional documents every 10, 15 years. Let's change it. Let's make it flexible. I mean, these times are a-changing. We've got to keep up with the trends. We've got to keep up with the new ideas. We've got to keep up with the new judges coming out of the educational institutions, you see. What sort of foundation does that leave us to stand on? It's not a solid one, that's for sure. Mr. Armstrong wrote years ago about all of this knowledge that man is producing, disseminating all of this knowledge, and yet there's just no happiness. There's accelerating troubles, he said. There's problems everywhere. There's mounting evils. He said it was like being on a raft, stranded in the ocean, water everywhere, but none of it fit for drinking. You're dying of thirst. You're on a raft. You see water everywhere, but it's all contaminated. John chapter 9. Evolving toward anarchy. That's where we're headed. My father made that point in the No Freedom Without Law booklet. And that booklet was put together a number of years ago. I think about 12 or 13 years ago, in fact. And there's some pretty forward-thinking statements made in that little booklet. Statements that you can see being fulfilled today. John chapter 9 and verse 39. Jesus Christ came to this earth to bring justice and judgment. Of course, he's not seen that way, not even in traditional Christian religion. He's not seen as a just judge because he's not seen as a ruler and a coming king. He's seen as a dead sacrifice, essentially. That's it. But in fact, he came to this earth to bring justice, to bring righteous judgment, to teach, to lead, to establish truth, truth that doesn't change, truth that you can always, always hang your hat on. You can always fall back on. And know that you'll be solid. And know that you'll be grounded. John chapter 9 and verse 39. And Jesus said, for judgment I am come into this world, that they which see not might see, and that they which see might be made blind. See, he came to turn this upside-down world right side up. That's what's coming. God has prophesied that this world would be upside down, that there would be judges today who call evil good and good evil. But Jesus is coming to restore truth and mercy and justice. He's coming to establish God's kingdom, God's government on this earth. And you can look at this world today and know, and just know, if you have a bit of God's truth dwelling in your mind, you can know how desperately this world needs righteous judgment. Men don't even know what that kind of justice is like today. But look, Jesus Christ knows, and he wants to give it to everyone. He wants to give sight to those who are blind. And that's going to come, and come very soon, to this earth. Christ will, when he returns, when he establishes God's government in Jerusalem, he will then implement his system of justice based upon God's law of love.